This is Chuck Huber, the voice of Android 17. You're listening to Anime Seekers. You better be, or I'm coming for you. Dragon of the Darkness, Flame!
Jedi Squadron is a podcast run by the Anime Secrets website. Check us out at animesecrets.org for more anime, video game, tokusatsu, and now Star Wars content. Remember to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts today.
Hello, new Padawans, and welcome to the Jedi Squadron podcast. Here, you will be taking lessons in the many pieces of the Star Wars universe, whether it be the movies, animated series, video games, comics, and etc. This is your training into becoming a Star Wars fan as part of the Jedi Squadron. May your training go well, and may the Force be with you, young Padawans. What is going on, Star Wars Nation? This is the Jedi Squadron podcast presented by animesecrets.org. I am your host, Nathan Desai.
And I'm your host, Rizwan Merchant.
And today on the date is April 28th, 2024, in preparation for the second season of... So basically, it's now been official that the series is called Star Wars Tales, and there is a second season coming out called Tales of the Empire, which is set to premiere on May the 4th. So in preparation for that, Riz and I are going to be taking a look at the very first season of this Tales series called Tales of the Jedi, which originally premiered on Disney Plus on October 26th of 2022. All of the episodes premiered, although I think the first episode got like a bit of a sneak peek at one convention, but the series as a whole came out on October 26th. So for those who do not know, Tales. So the Tales series is basically all just like a series of I don't want to say unrelated, but self-contained shorts revolving around different characters of different eras. So in the case of Tales of a Jedi, where it explores Jedi from the prequel trilogy era, we have 6 episodes. Not sure how many episodes are going to be on Tales of the Empire, but we'll talk about that when we get to
6.
it. Okay, cool. So we're going to be doing a bit of a different format here. When we've taken a look at Rebels and Bad Batch, and that's probably how we're going to handle Clone Wars 2, spoiler alert, we talk about the whole plot of the series as a whole, but seeing as these are all, again, not unrelated, but self-contained stories, we're just going to take a look at them one by one and then give our commentary on them. So with that said, we're going to dive right in, because even though we got 6 shorts, there's a lot to talk about with these, because we're going to have a lot of fun here.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Nathan said, these are supplemental to fill in the gaps of things that maybe you wouldn't know from just watching, the movies or watching Clone Wars, Bad Batch, Rebels, whatever. So these help fill in the gap of things that we don't know, to help enhance our understanding of characters that we know and love already, or maybe characters, as we'll get to in this podcast, that maybe you just didn't really care about, but now you have nothing but admiration for this character. So, yeah, that's my little spiel. Let's get into Life and Death, Nate.
All right, we're going to start with the first episode of these shorts, Life and Death. This episode takes place between the years 36 BBY and 35 BBY. Supposedly on the planet Sheely, although I'll talk about that in a second. But we are shown the birth of a fan favorite character, Ahsoka Tano, who is born to a Togruta colony. And while she's on a hunting trip with her mother, Pafti, she gets kidnapped by a saber-toothed tiger creature. But through a miracle, Ahsoka is able to tame the creature and convince it to return her to her tribe. And it is here that Gantika, that's her colony leader, concludes that Ahsoka's a Jedi, which is going to lead to one of the flashbacks that we saw in the Clone Wars, where Plo Koon at some point came and discovered her and took her into the Jedi Order. like I said, this may be the first on-screen appearance of the world Sheely. This is the home world of the Tograda species. That's Ahsoka Tano's alien species. Now, it should be noted that Filoni has never specifically identified the planet as Sheely, so it could be a Tograda colony, but the Star Wars wiki does say that it's on Sheely, so we can just assume that's the case. We see a squirrel creature, which might be a Thimiar. They're said to be rodent creatures native to Sheely. They were mentioned in the Clone Wars movies novelization. We see deer-like creatures. Those are the creatures that Popti are hunting. They're called Kybucks. They make their on-screen canon debut here. They were originally canonized in the Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary book, and they first appeared in the 2003 Clone Wars micro series. And the saber-toothed tiger creature is possibly an Akul. These are feline creatures native to Sheely. Their teeth are said to be prized in Togruddan culture. And believe it or not, another Togrudda, Jedi Master Shakti, she can be seen wearing their teeth as part of her headdress. So, that wraps up all the information on this. What did you think of this one, Riz? Life and Death.
Life and Death to me is it's kind of like a preview for what Tales of the Jedi will be, because this focusing on Ahsoka when she's born in her first year of life doesn't really give us a lot of character insight as say like other episodes in this will give, but it is interesting to see some of the culture of her people. Like, you know, I know next to nothing about Togurta as a species and their culture. So,
Yeah.
kind of seeing some of that stuff was very interesting to me. And mainly the fact that after 1 year, it seems to be customary to take the baby that was born a year prior into the forest for a hunt so they can witness life and death, which is the name of this episode. And the one thing I will say though, I wish they had one throwaway line to have enhanced the story just that much more. And that throwaway line would have been at the end when the elder of the tribe, I think her name was Gantika,
Yeah, Gantika.
um, when she's saying Ahsoka the Jedi, having her add one extra line after where she said, perhaps we should call it a Jedi, or, you know, investigate this further, or something to kind of indicate, okay, here is where in Ahsoka's life, this exact moment is when the Jedi were notified about her and took her. Because it's a little ambiguous. It could have been that she was taken away the next day, or it could have been that she stayed with her parents and family for another 5 or 6 months before the Jedi got clued into what's going on here. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, this is not anything that would like really dampen the episode, but that one little thing would have thrown this over the top for me, at least.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Is that me being too nitpicky, you think, or is that?
No, I agree. I kind of, I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I don't mind. Like, this is going to be some of my feelings for, the next two shorts revolving around Ahsoka. The Ahsoka ones aren't as amazing. I think that this one is, like it's nice to see Ahsoka's like origins with the Force. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it probably would have been nice if maybe they expanded it a little bit. I mean, maybe like we could have seen like her bond, maybe show a more in-depth clip of like her bonding with Plo Koon when he comes to like recruit her or something. I definitely get it. Like, there's a lot missing from this for it to be like truly like great. Well, not great. It's great, but for it to like stand out as like amazing, there's some missing from it.
Yeah, it just feels kind of hollow, and like it's kind of implied that when what is that creature called? The Akul?
Cool.
When the
Yeah.
Akul kidnaps her, that she's using her Jedi capabilities to communicate and have him bring her home either by Jedi mind trick or communing with nature or something. So that was interesting, but it just felt like my question at the end was, okay, this is cool, it was interesting, but what did we really learn and gain about this from Ahsoka that I didn't know 15 minutes ago?
Yeah.
Because when we get to the next couple of episodes, I mean, I gotta tell you, I learned a lot.
Yep. Do we want to do like ranking out of tens for each of these individually?
I mean, we can. I was gonna give this an 8 if you asked me.
Yeah, I'd give it an 8 too. It's
Yeah.
not. I mean, it's. I mean, I don't think it's the weakest of any of these. I mean, it might be, but it's still pretty good. It's just missing a few key pieces to make it like a 9 or a 10.
Yeah.
Do we want to move on to the next one?
Yep.
Okay. All right. This next episode is called Justice. It takes place in between the years 68 and 58 BBY. And it is here that Jedi Master Dooku, he's not a Sith Lord yet. He's in his prime. He's a Jedi Master, part of the Order. And his young Padawan, Qui-Gon Jinn, they're sent to a desolate planet to resolve a political dispute. The planet is never given a name, by the way. When they arrive, they find that the planet's natives are all impoverished thanks to the horrible policies of their corrupt Senator Dagonet, and they've kidnapped his son to try and, force change. And this dispute quickly escalates into a violent skirmish. Dagonet arrives with his army and threatens to destroy the entire village and make an example of anyone who defies him. And this sends Dooku into like a rage where he nearly is driven to the dark side. He tries to kill Dagonet because he believes that corruption like Dagonet, quote, corruption like yours must be eradicated, unquote. But thankfully, Qui-Gon is able to calm him down before he gives in. The dispute gets resolved. Dagonet's son gets released, and he promises to help bring the world's suffering to an end. And the episode ends on a very heartwarming note where, um, Dooku commends Qui-Gon for his brave actions, and Qui-Gon, says that he's only where he's at thanks to Dooku's teachings, and then they leave. Three notes to make: the ship that Qui-Gon and Dooku travel to was a T6 shuttle. We see these ships be frequently used as an unarmed transport for the Jedi in the Clone Wars series, and we also saw Ahsoka use it in Ahsoka. Even though Ahsoka hadn't come out by the time this series came out. And the Clone Wars series specifically identifies these types of ship as older models, so it makes sense why Dooku and Qui-Gon would be using one at a time. Here is a very cool note. Young Qui-Gon is voiced by Michael Richardson. He is the son of Liam Neeson, a.k.a. the man who played Qui-Gon Jinn in The Phantom Menace. I love that little detail. That's just awesome. And the farming droid that Dooku and Qui-Gon see on the unnamed planet, it's the same droid model that we see in an episode of The Mandalorian. The episode has Sanctuary. So that wraps up the notes for this episode. What do we think about this one, Riz?
So before we get into the review, I do want to add another set of notes to this that I think were missed on this one for Justice. So the planet is actually Raxus, which is the capital of the Confederacy of Independent Systems during the Clone Wars, and is a main focal point of a lot of stuff that we see. We see it in Clone Wars in the episode Heroes on Both Sides.
Wait, are you sure it
Um,
was Raxus? I think the next episode is where there's a lot of stuff on Raxus Secundus.
it's this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they specifically said Raxus at one point in the episode. That's why I remembered and went and looked it up.
Okay.
It's also in Bad Batch. It's in Tales of the Jedi, obviously, and
Yep.
apparently it also appears in Dark Disciple, which is a book.
Yep, it does.
Yeah. So, yeah, this place has some significance in the history of what we're, the Star Wars world. pretty significant history, if I might say so.
Yep.
Um, and it's kind of interesting, to see how this interaction kind of helps sour this planet from the Jedi a little bit.
Yep.
Um, because a couple of things happen here. You're seeing the people of this planet kind of say, hey, the Jedi are nothing but the Senator's dogs. They're not really independent. They're not really looking out for the betterment of people. They're just looking out for the rich and the wealthy. And later on, when we have Clone Wars begin, this is kind of the same rhetoric we see where they want to be independent. They don't want to have anything to do with the Republic. And this is a good reason for why they don't, because they literally see the Republic and the Jedi as nothing but a present to them. So this does a couple of things to me. One, it kind of sets up the Clone Wars to even happen from
Mm-hmm.
another angle, because obviously, Clone Wars began with Palpatine and with the clones and the battle and all that, but this is the origin of how it happened, at least from the Separatist point of view. But then, more interestingly, Dooku is very disgusted with what he's learned here, and this will kind of carry on throughout the tales a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
where he's very frustrated with how our Republic addresses the different planets like Roxas and insert other separatist planet here that didn't want to be a part of it.
Yep.
Um, and he's seen questioning the orders of everyone. And you don't really do that if you're a Jedi, according to the dogma of the Jedi. You just kind of follow orders, which we'll talk about in the next episode a lot more. But
there's shades
um,
in this where, Dagonet is demanding that Dooku arrest those citizens, and then Dooku says, no, our investigation isn't done. And then he says, step aside. And then Dooku says, no, we can't. And then Dagonet says, hello, you're a Jedi. You serve the Senate. And
yeah,
Dooku is all like, no, we serve the people of this republic.
exactly. So, yeah, it's very much apparent that the issues plaguing these different planets that will someday form the Separatist Union
Yep.
began, 30, 40, 60 years ago in this case, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these are long-standing issues, and it just goes to show that, while Palpatine was this brilliant man who was able to do all the stuff he did, it wasn't just Palpatine's doing. It was just a broken republic from even before Palpatine really had power.
Yeah.
Because,
I mean, for all we know, I don't even think Palpatine was he may have been a Naboo senator at this point, but maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what
well,
his political standing would be at this point in the timeline.
I don't know, because I don't even think Palpatine was really even that relevant in Naboo. Because the way it felt when you look into later mediums like Clone Wars and with, episode 1 and 2, maybe I'm misinterpreting this because I haven't seen these things in a while, but to me, it seemed like that was the beginning of his career a little bit.
What was the beginning?
Like around a little bit before episode 1.
Yeah, no, I think he was. No, he definitely would have been a senator long before episode 1 because he was a very respected senator by the time of the invasion of Naboo because that was part of his whole ultimate plan. Like he's going to become a senator of Naboo and he's going to become over time he's going to become a very respected senator that like everyone loves and looks up to where it's easy for him to get elected when he encourages Padme to question Valorum and call for Valorum to be replaced. So it would have taken him a bit of a long time to become really respected as a Naboo senator, because you don't just get into politics. I mean, you're immediately just a beloved senator by like everyone, if you know what I mean.
No, that makes sense. I can see that. Yeah.
But to talk more about this episode, like the substance of this is like when I was first watching this, like I genuinely, this is just amazing because, I like one of the canon novels that I looked at, and I'm going to review here on the Squadron at some point, is Master and Apprentice. Now, the bulk of that book revolves around like Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon going on an adventure before Phantom Menace, but Qui-Gon has a couple of flashbacks to when he was Dooku's apprentice, and we saw like one or two where Dooku was showing shades of turning to the dark side, and I'm really, I was just totally excited to see like an on-screen portrayal of just seeing Dooku when he's in his prime and like young Qui-Gon going on a mission together. That was something that I always wanted to see, and this episode gave me exactly what I wanted. We see, Dooku and Qui-Gon doing their thing. We see shades of, what led Dooku to eventually turn to the dark side, and not only that, but it also kind of creates it has a very sad ending when you think about it, because we can see that Dooku and Qui-Gon have a genuinely heartwarming relationship where Dooku loves Qui-Gon like a son, to the point where Qui-Gon is maybe Yoda, but Qui-Gon is probably the only person who's capable of calming down Dooku before he does anything truly like terrible. Qui-Gon is the thing that, basically Qui-Gon kept what was left of like the light side in Dooku alive for so long, to the point where when the episode ends with like that heartwarming music, it's a genuinely heartwarming moment. And honestly, the second time I watched it, part of me just kind of felt really sad, because it's not like, ugh, Qui-Gon's gonna die and Dooku's gonna become a dark Sith Lord. Ugh, this is so sad, but it's still a happy moment. That's what makes it so sad in a really ironic way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, again, like I said in the Ahsoka episode just now, there was one character I mentioned that I didn't really care about until I watched the Tales of the Jedi, and if you hadn't figured it out yet, it's Count Dooku. I had no interest in him during the prequel trilogy. I had no real interest in him when he appeared in the Clone Wars. He was just kind of there to be there to me. But then seeing him kind of go through the stuff he's going through, questioning the Order, questioning the Senate, questioning the Republic, and his duty, and doing his own thing, you start to feel for the guy.
Mm-hmm. And I like how it's, setting the seeds for, and I really like how it, makes the relationship between, it really shows how important the relationship between Dooku and Qui-Gon was, because I don't know much about Dooku's fall to the dark side in Legends, but I do know that it had that like his fall happens much earlier than it does technically in this timeline, where something happens while like the Jedi and the Republic intervene during like a civil war on Mandalore, which causes Dooku to like really discover that the Jedi kind of suck, and then he turns on them. But here, like, and I don't even think that they go into much detail on like his relationship with Qui-Gon. Like probably the most that we get of his relationship with Qui-Gon is when he's clearly sad that Qui-Gon died during Attack of the Clones, when he's interrogating Obi-Wan. But yeah, it's the relationship between Dooku and Qui-Gon that really just makes this episode for me, because you can tell that like Dooku genuinely loves Qui-Gon like a son, and
Oh, absolutely. And
and
that's even more amplified in the next episode, too.
yeah, well, not the next episode, but the episode after that.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is like one of the best single episodes of any Star Wars animated content, I would say. Like I genuinely was like it genuinely kind of hit me really hard when I watched this episode, when I watched it 2 years ago for the first time. absolutely amazing. It sets the seeds perfectly for Dooku turning to the dark side, and I love the relationship between Dooku and Qui-Gon. Like this is an undisputed 10 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I'm saving my 10 for another episode, but this is definitely very high up there, so I'm going to drop a 9.5 here for this one.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Do we want to move on to the next one?
Let's go.
All right, next up we have another Dooku episode. It's called Choices. This takes place in between the years of 50 BBY and 42 BBY. Jedi Masters Mace Windu and Dooku are sent to the planet Raxus Secundus. They're sent to retrieve a body of Jedi Master Katri. She was mysteriously killed by a group of rebels while guarding a senator. But Dooku suspects something greater might be at work, and he wants to investigate. Although Windu doesn't want to, because he's just saying, "Hey, the council just said we're supposed to do this, and that's all we should do." And while they're investigating, this leads to a skirmish. It ends with Senator Larrick being killed. And one of the guards reveals that they killed Katri because they wanted to force the senator to ending his corrupt embezzlement schemes in favor of their pro-people agenda. And the reason why they had no faith in talking to Katri about this is because the Jedi Order, in recent years has become very deferent to the Senate. Like, basically, the Senate makes the laws in favor of like rich and powerful, and the Jedi just kind of serve as lapdogs for that. And Dooku is clearly hit by this, although Windu just rolls his eyes and just blindly preaches the textbook views of the Jedi Council. And they retrieve Katri's body. They give him a funeral. The funeral is basically done in the same way that Obi-Wan's fake funeral is shown in a season 4 episode of the Clone Wars. That little arc where Obi-Wan disguises himself as a bounty hunter to go undercover. And after Katri's funeral, Dooku learns that Windu is now going to be taking her vacant seat on the council, and it is very clear that the only reason Windu was selected is because he basically just does whatever the council tells him to do and is so deferent to the Senate, and the council doesn't want someone like Dooku, who tends to disagree with the Senate on many occasions on the council. The only other note I'll make is that this planet, most of this episode takes place on the planet Raxus Secundus. That's the future capital of the separatist forces. Their formal name is called the Confederacy of Independent Systems, the CIS. But we'll see that very frequently. And naturally, this episode does delve heavily into why it is one of the planets that wanted to secede from the Republic. So, what do we think about Choices, Riz?
I like this because we're getting more into the psyche of what Dooku was going through with what we were talking about in the last episode. Because there's more dissent of, well, the Jedi are the lapdog of the Senate is bad, Republic is bad. It's just an all-around big mess that Dooku's trying to come to terms with. And, the ending where he's not given the role on the council in favor of Mace, that just hits him pretty hard to be like, well, why? Why would this be a thing where I'm not the one? And it's like you said in your synopsis. This is because he doesn't follow orders. He doesn't agree with everything, and that just kind of shows an idea of corruption within the Jedi Order at this point that we may not have had in Jedi eras prior to this.
Yep.
Because I think, and again, I don't know too much about the High Republic, but from what little I do know, I think they were more open to dissenting opinions because I think that they believed it fostered better understanding of the world around them.
Yeah.
So to me, it just seems like these guys are falling into the darkness without realizing it. And you kind of get the feeling of this being a thing with how Mace clings so tightly to these arbitrary rules that, end of the day, to me, don't really matter. Like, yeah, it's important to have rules, but I mean, if you suspect foul play, you should investigate foul play.
Yeah.
But he didn't even want to investigate foul play because that's not in the scope of his work. And I'm like, dude, it's okay. You should look into it more and at least ask the heavy question of what happened here, especially when Dooku gave what I thought was a really well formulated answer to why he thinks there's foul play.
Yeah, and it also kind of shows like how kind of messed up, kind of brainwashy the Jedi Council can be, because they specifically say that like only the council is allowed to delve into political situations. If you're not on the council, you're basically required to be apolitical. And when you go on a mission for a political dispute, you're basically supposed to just do what the council tells you without thinking or anything. And which, yeah, I mean, that is super corrupt.
Yeah, it just it rubs me the wrong way that the Jedi were like this, and it
And
honestly makes me kind of root for Dooku in a weird way.
yeah, and the reason why I like this is because, to bring up that book, Master and Apprentice again, I'm not going to go into spoilers on the book, but well, minor spoiler, but it doesn't really relate to the plot. Basically, in that book, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are sent to a planet to resolve a different political dispute, and Qui-Gon learns while he's on the planet that it's that there's like this really big company called Circa, which is employing slavery, like, very immoral slavery practices on the planet, and he wants to try and put an end to it, and he tries to contact the council, and the council reveals like, oh yeah, we already knew that there was slavery happening, and I mean, the Senate doesn't want to do anything about it, so yeah, just ignore it and continue on with your mission. And it's like, aren't you guys keepers of the peace? Aren't you supposed to be helping people? And yet you're gonna let slavery be a thing? Like, oh, like, come on, guys. Like, God.
Yeah,
And the practices here kind of really mesh with that perfectly.
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, this was another good one for Dooku. Just further showing. Well, the last one was kind of showing more of how angry he is with the corruption of the Senate. That's in this episode, but this is more of him becoming disillusioned with the ideas of the Jedi Order, which kind of, plays off of the previous episode perfectly.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'll give this one a 9.5.
Same.
Cool. All right, now let's move on to the Sith Lord. You ready, Riz?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, cool. The year is 32 BBY. This actually ties in. Well, the first part of this episode ties into the events of the Phantom Menace pretty perfectly. It literally is happening at the same time that the Trade Federation is invading Naboo. We see Dooku erase the Camino system from the Jedi archives via the clearance code of Jedi Master Sifo Dyas. He meets his old Padawan, Qui-Gon, because word of his supposed encounter with a Sith Lord is spreading around the temple. As you'll remember, Qui-Gon had that encounter with Maul on Tatooine. A few days later, Qui-Gon has died. He was killed in the lightsaber duel with Darth Maul during the battle for Naboo. He refuses to attend Qui-Gon's funeral. And Jedi Master Yaddle, she follows Dooku to a building where she finds him meeting Darth Sidious. It's revealed that Dooku has been working with Sidious for a long time out of his desire to rebuild the galaxy. And Yaddle finds him and urges Dooku to atone for what he's done. She stepped down from the council because she feels sympathy for what Dooku had to say, and she tries to rally Sidious. She tries to rally Dooku to bring Sidious to justice, but Dooku is now completely disillusioned by his disdain for corruption in the Senate and the Jedi Council, and now that Qui-Gon, aka the only man who was able to ever keep him calmed down, is dead, there's basically nothing left for Dooku, and he fully embraces the dark side. He becomes Darth Tyrannus, and he accepts Darth Sidious as his new master, and Yaddle is killed in a lightsaber duel. Now, a very important thing to note about this episode is that there's some discontinuity. There's been a bit of controversy in the fandom about the timeline here because so in the book that I just mentioned, Master and Apprentice, as well as the audio drama Dooku Jedi Lost, and then the YA novel Padawan, it is specifically stated in all of those mediums that Dooku left the Jedi Order prior to the events of the Phantom Menace, yet he is seen meeting Qui-Gon, which would imply that he's still a member of the Order during the events of the Phantom Menace. But I actually watched Star Wars Explained. There's my obligatory plug for his series on it. And this can actually be... Yeah. This can be reconciled with the continuity set in the stories because it's never stated that Dooku is part of the Order in the episode. And the book Padawan apparently also establishes that Dooku would occasionally visit the temple. He's still very well respected in the Jedi Order. So, despite leaving, he was allowed to keep his lightsaber. So, it's possible that his visit here is simply another one of his visits. And not only that, but the fact that Dooku needed to use Sifo Dyas, his clearance code, to delete Camino from the Jedi archives, that also aligns with him probably not have been a member of the Order, since he wouldn't have had his own clearance code. And also, a very important thing is that Dooku has apparently never met Obi-Wan when he's meeting with Qui-Gon, so that might also boost the fact that he's no longer a member of the Order. So, basically, to cut a long story short, we can conclude that in the timeline of this episode, Dooku has probably left the Order, but my thoughts are is that maybe Dave Filoni maybe he had all these things in mind, but he still wanted to leave it intentionally vague because then people who have never read the books can simply say, okay, this is when Dooku officially left the Order, when other people who have read the books can just interpret it in a different way. So, some other notes. Like I said, Dooku was seen deleting the Camino system from the Jedi archives. That ties into the story with Attack of the Clones. Adult Qui-Gon is voiced by Liam Neeson, his actor from The Phantom Menace, because I don't know if everybody knows this, but Liam Neeson absolutely loves coming back to play Qui-Gon. That's why he came back to play Qui-Gon for just like 2 seconds in Kenobi. Any opportunity he has to play Qui-Gon, he will always come back to play Qui-Gon. Jedi Master Yaddle is voiced by Bryce Dallas Howard. She is very involved in Star Wars. She's directed several episodes of The Mandalorian and Ahsoka, and her father Ron also directed Solo: A Star Wars Story. Qui-Gon speaks very highly of Obi-Wan, leading to Dooku voicing his desire to meet him someday. And unfortunately, they will meet later in Attack of the Clones, but under very different circumstances. The Great Tree in the Jedi Temple Courtyard was shown multiple times in the Clone Wars animated series. Dooku mentions Qui-Gon is originally from Coruscant. That was originally established in the Ultimate Star Wars reference book. Dooku meets with Palpatine in the same hangar where they can be seen meeting at the end of Attack of the Clones. Palpatine here is once again voiced by the great Ian McDiarmid, who has played Palpatine in basically everything. He played him in Return of a Jedi. He played him in the prequels. He played him in Rise of Skywalker, voiced him in Rebels. And finally, This episode gives the official canon explanation on Jedi Master Yaddle's fate. She disappeared after the Phantom Menace, and her death at the hands of Dooku, who's just turned to the dark side, it's a pretty big change from her death in Legends. In Legends, there was this YA book novel series. I actually read it when I was a kid, called The Jedi Quest, which revolves around some of Obi-Wan and Anakin's adventures in between the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. And Yaddle gets killed while on a mission with them to the planet Mawan. So, yeah, I mean, personally, I kind of like this death better than the Legends one, but that's just me. But yeah, Riz, what do we think about this episode?
This is where I'm going to give it a 10, FYI. Because there's just so many things in this episode to unpack. And the biggest thing is, we spent 2 episodes kind of getting a feel for Dooku and his fall from the Jedi Order. And for the record, I'm in the camp that believes Dooku left the Order well before Phantom Menace, but he's still a respected member of the group. He'll come by, visit on the weekend, say hi, get a picture of the group, whatever, but he's kind of done with them for whatever reason. I think he was done with them because he's so disillusioned with what they were fighting for.
Yep.
So he just stepped away, which I guess is a valid thing you can do as a Jedi. You can walk away whenever you want. I didn't really think that was possible unless you're expelled. So that was interesting to kind of get some info on. But the thing that's much more fascinating to me was just how much he grieved for Qui-Gon. And I gotta tell you, the reason I'm giving this a 10 is that tree scene. When he's standing in front of the tree, telling Yaddle like how he'd bring Qui-Gon here as a boy. I mean, that is some emotion he is conveying, and it hit me hard, harder than the other episodes did.
Yep.
So to me, this is hands down some of the best writing we get in this season, and quite possibly one of the best episodes across the entirety of the franchise in terms of like the animated series.
Yeah, and it's not just... Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
It's not just that scene, but I love that scene where Qui-Gon and Dooku are meeting like right there as like adults, because like having Liam Neeson voice Qui-Gon in that moment, that's really it's kind of like how that scene in Rebels where Ahsoka busts Vader's mask open, and we see like where the voice Vader's voice is kind of a mix between Matt Landers and James Earl Jones. Like that connects the two worlds because James Earl Jones voiced Vader in the live action movies, and you can connect those two worlds. It's the same thing here. Like having Liam Neeson voice Qui-Gon, it really adds to a lot, because I can now imagine like live action Qui-Gon talking with like live action Dooku. And of course, it sucks that Christopher Lee is no longer with us, because then you could have had Christopher Lee voice Dooku at that point, and that would have made it even better. But just having Liam Neeson there, it means a lot. It really hits you on a different level to see the guy who played Qui-Gon actually speaking to Dooku. Yeah,
definitely means a lot.
And that scene in general is just really powerful, where where Dooku is putting his hand on Qui-Gon's shoulder and saying, "You need to be careful, because if something were to ever happen to you, I won't be there to protect you anymore." Like, it really shows that like the one person who kept Dooku from going like full on Sith Lord was Qui-Gon, and when Qui-Gon died, so too did everything that was good in Dooku's heart.
Yeah.
And it's just such deep stuff. Like it honestly kind of makes, like, honestly, when we have to like rewatch the Clone Wars for our podcast, half the time I might want to be rooting for Dooku to win, just knowing all the stuff that he went through.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I want to root for Dooku because, okay, so I don't think Dooku is necessarily a Sith Lord. I think he was seduced into doing so under the false promise of bettering the Confederacy and the Republic, but I don't think he had bad intention. I think he was trying to do what he thought was best for everyone, but he put in a lot with the wrong group.
Yeah.
Like, it sucks because he has such a valiant heart. He wants to help people. He wants to be there to, you know, solve the murder. He wants to be there to take care of his a Padawan. He wants to do all this noble stuff. He has no building blocks of being evil. I mean, okay, yeah, he killed Yaddle, which I also was not a fan of, but because I like Yaddle in this episode a lot, by the way. But
Yeah.
by this point, I mean, do you really blame the guy? He just lost Qui-Gon. He's trying to reconcile his feelings, and he's under the influence of one of the baddest people in the galaxy. I mean, at this point in time, there's nobody who can really take on Palpatine. Maybe, Yoda can, but I don't think so. Not yet. Because
And
if that was the case, Yoda would have defeated him in episode 3.
yeah, this is, I mean, once again, like, Dooku was just ultimately Dooku just turned out to be just another chess piece in Palpatine's little game. Because, I mean, when you think about how Dooku ultimately ends up going out, like, Palpatine, who was literally his master, is just sitting there watch Anakin duel against him, and then he sees Anakin like overpower Dooku and have him cornered, and Palpatine is like
Yeah.
lethal and like, "Yay, yes, Anakin, you did good. Now kill him." And then Dooku was all like, "What? Seriously?" Like
Yeah.
in the end, he was just another pawn to Sidious's game, and much like how you feel sorry for Maul in the Clone Wars after all he went through, now they've humanized Dooku even more.
I mean, and that's the thing, is that, I think you and I have talked about this off podcast before, that Maul has a very tragic story. Well, Dooku has a very tragic story too, which just shows that, these two characters tried to do good, even in Maul's last breath with Ahsoka. Like, in that last battle, he's not trying to fight her. He's trying to warn her of, hey, your former master is going to do some really bad stuff. You got to help. But no one wants to listen to him because he's been tainted as a Sith Lord.
Yep.
And, even his story, and we'll get into this a lot more because I don't want to make this into a Clone Wars podcast, but, he went through a lot of stuff with his journey into Clone Wars before all this stuff even happened,
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, I don't know, it just seems like there's a lot of depth to this episode where it helps to unpack the bigger picture of what's happening behind the scenes of even the Clone Wars. I mean, they explicitly mentioned the Sith Lord, and Dooku references Darth Maul in the episode to Palpatine, but the way he references him, he calls him the Sith Lord, but if he was a Jedi Master prior to all this, he knows there can only be two, and if there's Palpatine and Maul, then he knows he's not the one.
Yep.
So he didn't even see himself being a Sith. He just saw himself as helping the Sith because they seduced him to the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. This episode has a lot going for it. I mean, I could see somebody writing a whole thesis for like a graduate school thing on this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's enough material here to really write something. And I just can't say enough about it to put it into words and do it justice. But my God, Filoni really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, this is easily the best episode of the whole series, and if I could give it something higher than a 10, I would give it that thing higher than a 10.
I mean, I'm well known for giving numbers that are not within our 10-point scale. So I might just drop an 11.5 on this one.
Yeah, 11.5 for me too. Like, this is just amazing writing.
Yeah, I just checked. Filoni's the one that wrote it, and he's the one that created it, so he's the entire driving force behind it.
Yep. So
And just to close out, I mean, the other thing I want to mention here, Yaddle's character, she was a background character, I think, in Phantom Menace, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken.
she was.
Yeah. I don't think we see her again after that because she died in this episode. We see that now. But just when you first see Yaddle in Phantom Menace, you think, oh, it's gonna be another Yoda, and she talks in that weird way, just like Yoda, but she talks in full, complete, proper sentences, and
Yeah.
she has a big heart. She's very compassionate. She's actually trying to tell Dooku at one point, like, I understand. I left the council because I am starting to agree with you. I'm seeing your point. I get it. I want to help you. I want to fight with you. I want to get you out of this mess. Please help me help you. And I mean, could you imagine if Yaddle survived? How big that would have been for the entirety of this like conflict?
Yeah.
I mean, I still don't know what Yaddle's Yaddle and Yoda's race is, or Grogu for that matter.
Yeah,
But
they still haven't given an official name for it.
but I have to start to think these people from this race are very powerful, not in like terms of raw strength, but in the connection to the Force and like their compassion and stuff like that. Because Yoda is also very compassionate at the end of the day, and Grogu might be when he stops eating all the butterflies and stuff. Not butterflies, but like frogs.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. It just I want more Yaddle, and I know I'm not going to get that, and that's kind of sad.
Yeah, I do hear that Yaddle. Well, actually, yeah, I'm looking on the Star Wars wiki right now, and she does appear in like a handful of High Republic novels. So
Yeah.
I'm going to be I'm actually reading the High Republic novels right now. Not far enough to really give an opinion thus far, but yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing her a bit more. Although I have to say, I find it kind of funny that seeing Yaddle be portrayed like this because I remember I can't. It probably was before this came out. I was watching an interview with Claudia Gray. She's a Star Wars writer.
Yep.
She's written a lot of really amazing Star Wars novels, and she said that like she always had like a fan interpretation that like she always imagined like Yaddle being like a Wolverine like type of character on the Jedi. Like she, she's a wise Jedi master, but she kind of has a whole like I don't really care anti-hero type of attitude and like smoke cigars on the side.
Hmm.
Yeah, Miss Gray, Miss Gray, I really like that interpretation, but you're gonna have to do that with another Jedi now. Yeah, sorry about
Yeah.
that, but it's still cool. Although I really would love to see a Jedi Master portrayed like that. The more I think about it,
Yeah, I was looking at the Wikipedia as well just now to see what her appearances are. On the off chance she does make a cameo in the Young Jedi Adventure cartoon that I need to watch still, but
yeah,
I don't see her listed there, unfortunately.
but it's cool that we get an official explanation on how she died because she wasn't in a Attack of the Clones. According to like the official timeline, she got replaced by Shock T on the council. So
Yeah, and that kind of makes me wonder a little bit. Did George Lucas plan some of this stuff and he gave the notes to Filoni, or did George Lucas just decide, sorry, I don't want a female Yoda on the council in the second episode? And Filoni's like, well, hang on, let me make a story about why.
I mean, I can't remember when like I mean. For all I know, I don't know when that Jedi Quest book came out that features her death on a Mawan came out, although it might have come out before Attack of the Clones, and George Lucas was just, smart enough to know maybe she shouldn't have been on there. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure what the story was behind, her just not showing up from behind the scenes thing on I can't think of a reason from behind the scenes why George Lucas wouldn't have won her on Attack of the Clones.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of a reason why not either. It's just kind of weird that, there's this intricate stuff across different people who worked on this franchise. And, Filoni was never part of the prequels, as far as I could tell, in terms of making those movies. So either he and Lucas worked really closely together even after Disney bought it out, or he has some secret Lucas notes that nobody knows about. Or he just is good at making up stuff. I don't know.
Okay, well, now looking at this, the Jedi Quest book came out in May of 2003, and Attack of the Clones was released in 2002. So yeah, apparently Yaddle just didn't appear in Attack of the Clones for God knows what reason, and we had the book, the Jedi Quest book that gave the Legends explanation on why she wasn't there, and now here's Dave Filoni giving a canon explanation on why she's not there. There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
So, not really sure why George Lucas just decided to throw her away, but who knows?
Maybe it's just to say there can only be one person that looks like Yoda.
Yeah, probably.
It might have
But
even been like a production cost. They probably had two Yoda suits in the storage, and they're like, "Well, we need more
well,
Jedi for the council, so let's put a wig on this one."
yeah, because because they used two Yoda puppets, but then it might have also had something to do with from Attack of the Clones, like in the original cut of the Phantom Menace, Yoda was portrayed as a puppet, but I mean, now whenever you watch it, it's CGI, but they put CGI over the puppet. But
Yep.
starting with Attack of the Clones, he was just pure CGI. So maybe they just didn't want to do another. They didn't want to CGI. It would look weird if you have a CGI Yoda and a puppet Yaddle.
Yeah.
So let's just, and maybe it would be too expensive to have two CGI aliens. So let's just get rid of Yaddle and then just CGI in Yoda.
Yeah. That's possible.
Yeah. But yeah, to go back to like the substance of the Sith Lord, I'm giving this like 11.5 out of 10. Just absolutely amazing.
Hell yeah. All right, let's
Yeah.
go.
All right, let's move on to the next one. Practice makes perfect. This is a simple one. It takes place over the course of the Clone Wars between 21 and 19 BBY. We see Ahsoka going through Jedi training, but then Anakin becomes dissatisfied with her training with remote, so he puts her through a more intense training with Rex and his 501st Legion troopers. And Ahsoka slowly improves, and then the episode cuts to a couple of to probably like 2 years later when the war is ending, where Ahsoka is a very similar situation, but to the 501st Legion troopers firing at her, but it's not training this time. It's during the final episode of the Clone Wars. We actually see some very familiar faces in this episode. We see Jedi Master Tera Sinube, the Kazian Jedi Master. We saw him in the Clone Wars. He's an older Jedi who trained younglings. We also saw his dead body in live action in the Kenobi series. We see Caleb Dune and Jedi Master Deba Balaba. Caleb being, this is before he becomes Kanan Jarrus. He's a main character in Rebels. Believe it or not, I'm not sure. I guess it was because the animation was limited at the time, but Obi-Wan's model and animated practice makes perfect is updated to where he's in his Attack of the Clones likeness. So we have Obi-Wan with his glorious Attack of the Clones helmet, and in Ahsoka's training, she gets stunned by clone trooper Jesse. Jesse will ironically go on to lead her execution mission upon receiving Order 66 in the Siege of Mandalore arc, and Ahsoka is also seen using very many moves that similar to ones that she'll be seen using against the troopers in the Siege of Mandalore arc. So yeah, what do we think about this one?
I think this is probably my favorite of the Ahsoka episodes we get in this season. It's simple, it's not very in depth, but the emotion of what we see 2 years later, like you mentioned, with her having to do this for real with the 501st trying to kill her, it's kind of a big deal. And also, I gotta say, Anakin is such a jackass, but he's also right that you can't just rely on the droid to like be your training for this. You need more than that. So having other training apparatus like the 501st to help, hone your skills is not a bad idea because you never know what the Confederate could have thrown at you next.
Yep.
So, yeah, no, I thought this was a pretty solid episode.
Yeah, this is one. I mean, it's simple, but I mean, I just thought that it was cool to see Ahsoka again. So I enjoyed it for what it was. There's not much else to talk about with this one. But I'd still probably give this one a 9 out of 10.
Yep.
All right, now let's move on to the last one to wrap up this podcast. It's called Resolve. In 19 BBY, Ahsoka encounters Senator Bail Organa while she's attending Padme's funeral shortly after the end of the Clone Wars. She refuses help offered to her from Organa, but then later on, at some point in between the years of 18 and 5 BBY, Ahsoka, she is working on a farm planet. A human woman that she befriends discovers her secret as a Jedi, and word about this gets out from an Imperial sympathizer, and an Inquisitor arrives on the planet, and Ahsoka defeats the Inquisitor before turning to Bail for help, and she accepts his offer. Now, much like the Sith Lord, this episode has some very major continuity issues, and unlike the Sith Lord, where it can be reconciled, there's some things in this episode that just don't really mesh up. And Riz can actually back me up on this one because he's actually read the book. So this episode follows the same story structure in the E.K. Johnson novel Ahsoka. Basically, the general story is that Ahsoka, she has a disguise named Ashla, and she's taken on a job on a farm of a remote planet, but then a human woman discovers her secret, and it leads to an Inquisitor, coming after Ahsoka when her secret gets out, and then she joins Bail Organa's rebellion. There's a couple of huge differences, though. Ahsoka's job in the novel is on a small moon called Rada, which only has a single settlement, but in the episode, Ahsoka and the sisters are delivering harvest elsewhere on the planet, implying that it's a bigger planet. And not only that, but Ahsoka is actually there when the Inquisitor attacks in the novel, as opposed to here, where she's absent. The novel specifically identifies the Inquisitor as the sixth brother. The episode makes no such specification. And a big thing to note about this is that the reference book, the Star Wars Dark Side Pocket Expert, that book actually does take in information referencing events depicted in Tales of a Jedi. It claims that the sixth brother only appeared in the Ahsoka novel and the Darth Vader comics in 2017, and the novel, and in the novel Inquisitor: Rise of the Red Blade, and the sixth brother is actually described in his likeness, depicted only in the Ahsoka novel in that book. So basically, he's not, described in his likeness in depicted here. So that battle that Ahsoka had in the novel and the episode are probably entirely separate events. But the reason why this kind of screws with the novel is because Ahsoka's contact with Bail Organa is completely irreconcilable, because the book depicts them making contact for the first time in over a year after the formation of the Empire. There's no mention of them ever meeting during Padme's funeral in the book. And, and not only that, but the book is also expressing them both being surprised that the other is still alive, even though they met like a year before, after the formation of the Empire. And so now it should be noted that, when the siege of the siege of Mandalore, we see flashbacks of that in the Ahsoka novel as well. And there's a lot of huge, retcons there too. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to when we review season 7 of A Clone Wars. But some people have kind of come to the conclusion that it's not necessarily a retcon so much as like both stories depict different versions of the same story. Like maybe the Ahsoka novel is like an in-universe myth that was told by people who were there, and the Tales of a Jedi version is what actually happened, or vice versa. So, yeah, that's a huge thing. Some other notes, Ahsoka is seen attending Padme's funeral. We see it appearing basically the same way as it did in Revenge of the Sith. Ahsoka is shown meeting with Rex at the Y-Wing freighter they commandeered during their escape from Order 66, as seen in the Siege of Mandalore story arc. And finally, we have Ahsoka's disguised name, Ashla, same disguised name she used. And funnily enough, it's a name that George Lucas... So the name Ashla actually came to George Lucas twice. It was a name that George Lucas considered calling the light side of the Force early on when he was writing the original movie. And he also considered giving Ahsoka the name Ashla before he decided to give it Ahsoka. So, yeah, that's about it. Riz, what do we think about this episode?
Okay, so I read the novel a long time ago. I'm not going to even put a number of years on it, but it's been at least 5 years since I read it, I think. And I was very confused with the continuity stuff you were talking about, because when I was watching the episode, I was like, wait, how does Bail and Ahsoka even meet? Because they didn't know they existed in the book. So I would consider the book decanonized in place of Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah.
It just makes the most sense to me, and it's the cleanest way I can look at it. I can't even... I would kind of want to move this to the EU, honestly.
Yeah, and honestly, like, with the timeline that, like, you read it, like, it would, you probably read the book around the time when her lightsabers during the Siege of Mandalore are... Because when the book originally came out, because keep in mind, it came out before they released the last season of the Clone Wars, they specifically refer to her lightsabers being green in the book. But then when the Siege of Mandalore story arc came out, they're blue. So they actually, had to completely. So now the book has been like retroactively changed to where now anytime you buy a book that's printed, the lightsabers are identified as blue. But yeah, for a while they were identified as green. There's a lot of other issues, like some of her flashbacks that we actually see in the Siege of Mandalore don't line up with what were shown in the animation. So yeah, with the Siege of Mandalore arc in this episode, that book just kind of, I don't want to say it should be considered EU, but the continuity doesn't always line up.
Well, it's not even just this stuff that doesn't line up. It's also the story of her and the Martell sisters that don't line up anymore. There's a lot of stuff that's just not lining up as it used to. So it's hard for me to consider this in canon or strict canon. And I think the idea of considering this the real events and the book as a myth, I mean, who's telling the myth?
Maybe one of the sisters that she befriended on the planet?
I mean, maybe, but that would have clued in Vader years before that she's still around.
Wouldn't there also have to be an explanation on how the sixth brother is dead then? Because the sixth brother is not identified as the Inquisitor in the episode, so the book would have to be the explanation on how he died.
Yeah, it's confusing. I don't understand. Like, yeah, that's another question.
Yeah, it's
And also, I think from what I'm reading, the sixth brother also appears in Inquisitor: Rise of the Red Blade.
yeah, he does. I mentioned that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So this one is a confusing bit, but if we're just talking about episode resolve, and if you consider the book Ahsoka like decanonized or no longer part of the current canon, I think this is a pretty good episode. I mean, it gives some good moments. Like I genuinely liked her and Bale having that moment, and her saying, "C was my friend. I have to be here," in reference to Padme.
Yeah.
Um, so I just think that this was a pretty good episode. Not as good as the one that preceded it, but still pretty good.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention apparently Ashley Eckstein or Eckstein, however you pronounce her last name. She apparently did say in an interview, like she was actually asked about how this episode relates in regards to the Ahsoka novel, and she actually said specifically that Dave Filoni never really took the book into consideration when writing this episode. So
It shows quite a bit.
yeah, yeah, I
And
forgot to mention that.
honestly, this is a problem. This is a problem I see Filoni running into every now and then because I don't know exactly how these books are written and the canon is decided, especially now that Filoni has been given that new title of creative producer or whatever of the entire franchise. Like, you know, there are certain things that you can't expect him to be able to keep track of when it's in a novel that's, kind of very separate from everything else going on, but has like one reference back.
Mhm.
Like, this just seems like when we look at other mediums, like maybe the video games, the books, you gotta take it with a more of a grain of salt than you would with the stuff that Filoni is directly working on, like the TV show, the movies, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and we're gonna be reviewing a novel pretty soon that kind of is gonna probably much more emphasize
Yeah,
that with these, but we'll talk
yeah.
about that when we get to it. Although I should note that I from what I gathered in the interview, like with what I read, like apparently Ashley Eckstein did read the book, and but she never really asked Filoni how this related to the book, but she personally considers it like an extension of the novel. Like this is
Yeah.
another part of the story that just like it's a chapter of Ahsoka's life during this time period before, like after Clone Wars, but before Rebels.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. I really enjoyed the episode. Um, it was just cool seeing Ahsoka take down that Inquisitor. I would probably consider the previous episode my favorite of the Ahsoka bunch.
Hmm.
Although I'll be honest, when I originally watched these, okay, I never disliked the Ahsoka ones, but they were just kind of. I mean, it's cool that they're there, but they're not really, you know, like big on my mind because the stuff with Dooku just blowed me away completely to the point
Yeah,
where I was just kind of thinking like, yeah, I mean, the Ahsoka stuff still like it. It's cool seeing Ahsoka again because I'm a huge fan of Ahsoka, but it's I mean, in this episode, it's just kind of how I feel. I mean, it's cool. It's there. I when I originally watched it, I guess I just kind of saw it as like an adaptation of the Ahsoka novel, which I thought was a decent novel.
yeah,
But yeah, there's not much else for me to say about that one. Like the Ahsoka ones don't go as deep as the Dooku ones.
right. Yeah, it makes sense. And I
And
agree with you. The Dooku stuff was top tier, and Ahsoka's still like, you know, it's a good tier, just not like the best stuff we got.
I'll probably give Resolve an 8 out of 10.
I was gonna go with like an 8 as well, I think. I was thinking 8.5, but I can't justify some of it with the continuity stuff going on.
Yeah. Yeah, if it didn't screw with the continuity set in the book so much, maybe I would consider an 8.5 or maybe a 9, but yeah, the
Yeah.
continuity stuff just kind of gives me a bit of a headache. So,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
but to kind of go into kind of segue into overall thoughts just before we wrap this up, I I really enjoy Tales of a Jedi overall. I was really looking forward to it, and at least with the Dooku stuff, it completely blew away my expectations, and I'm really looking forward to Tales of the Empire, especially since, spoiler alert, it has something that's going to happen that if you some of our past podcasts, I've literally been begging for it to happen, and it's going to happen. But I'm
Yep.
not going to spoil
Yep.
that. We'll get to that podcast when we get to it. But I am really looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward to next week when it comes out. And boy, Nate, we have a lot of stuff to podcast in the next week.
Yeah, we totally do.
We have this coming out. So, just to give the viewers back home an idea of what's going on, we're recording this on April 28th. Nathan said at the start, but this will probably get posted on May 3rd, and Tales of the Empire comes out on May 4th. But 2 days before we post this, the Bad Batch Season 3 ends. So we got to do Bad Batch Season 3, we got to do Tales of the Empire, and we got to get back on track with doing our movie reviews with Return of the Jedi. So I think there's a lot of content coming out for y'all during and after May 4th. So I'm pretty excited. And we also will have our own like celebratory type of podcast to commemorate that on May 4th. We will mark 1 year of the Jedi Squadron podcast. Because for those of y'all that don't know, Nathan and I began this journey as Squadron Leaders 1 year ago, May 4th. And I'm really pleased and proud of what we've done in the 1 year.
Yeah, I totally am too. Did you want to give any final thoughts on Tales of a Jedi, though?
Tales of the Jedi, awesome. Can't wait for Tales of the Empire next week. Yeah.
All right. Well, Riz just gave our schedule for the rest of the for our the upcoming couple of podcasts, and we hope you guys will check us out for that. Yeah, we'll see you guys next time for our next review, and bye for now. If you enjoy us here on the Jedi Squadron, then please consider checking out our other content, including the Anime Declassified podcast and the Toku Secrets podcast, which you can find on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or on our website, animesecrets.org. And if you have anything that you would like for us to review that hasn't already been covered here on the Squadron, feel free to leave any commentary, whether it be in the YouTube comments down below or by reaching out to us personally on our website. Also, please follow us on our social media pages, Anime Secrets, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to keep up with our content as we post it. If you're listening to us on Spotify or iTunes, we thank you so much and ask you to please leave us a rating out of 5 stars. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, like the video, and leave any comments down below that you may give in your commentary or stuff that you want us to review, and so on and so forth, and we will give your commentary a shout out on the Squadron, as we absolutely love to give our fans the shout outs that they deserve. With all that said, we thank you so much for listening to us here on the Jedi Squadron podcast, and we will see you next time for our next adventure through the amazing world of Star Wars. But until that time, the Squadron is preparing to enter hyperspace once again, so you all stay safe, we love you, and may the Force be with you.